How's it going, everyone? I'm back with another video, and it's a painting of this little abandoned gas station that I did a while ago. And I was thinking, are there any ways to kind of speed up your 2D process just so that you don't have to go into 3D and block things out? For me, there are a few things, if I'm just sticking with a 2D painting, that help me out a lot. And the first one is perspective grids, obviously. In Procreate, you can use their drawing assist, which forces your line to stick to the grid, which is awesome. If you're just using Photoshop, you don't have anything like that, but you can draw on your own grids and use your like straight line tool to do stuff. I think part of it is like a blessing and a curse with those perspective grids, though, because if you overuse them, things look like weirdly sterile and they don't look natural enough. But I feel like the same could be said for 3D too, if you stick to a grid. But if you're, just going 2D, put in your grid and then, stick to it sometimes, but then sometimes don't, because you want it to feel like man-made too. And we don't do everything perfectly, so sometimes even things like poles or like light poles, or even bits of the wall maybe aren't straight. Just kind of play with things a little bit, and especially if you're going to stylize stuff, you can always sort of tweak the angles a little bit, but you have to be careful that you don't overdo it, otherwise your perspective is going to look like it's wrong. So the next thing I think that's really important is keeping your layers organized. In this instance, I have a layer for my building. I have a layer for my floor. I have a layer for the different background elements and different layers for the plants. And what I'm doing is I almost keep like horizontal and vertical layers separate. It's like you saw me just draw in like that dark stuff on the wall. So I have that front wall and its layer is locked. The transparency is locked. So I can just draw with a soft brush and get kind of an occlusion on there really quickly. And the same thing is with the roof layer. That's a separate layer as well. And I can just kind of draw the occlusion on there. And that way, like, you don't have to worry about lassoing out stuff and trying to make really nice crisp edges. It kind of works for you on its own when you separate things like that. So think like walls are a layer, floor is a layer, roof is a layer. And that will help you kind of differentiate the planes that you're drawing on. And then when you get to do like this sort of grunge and stuff like that, it'll go really quickly. I have a similar process when I actually work in 3D, where I have either an object ID, a material ID, or like a normal map that I can then isolate different faces and paint that way. So the next thing, I think, the only other really thing that's important, I think, is really this grunge trick that it's been popped up a few times, right? I'll make a new layer and I will put down some grunge texture, and then I will transform that into perspective so that it's in line with whatever surface it's on. And that's a really good way to quickly add some sort of grungy noise that, maybe not necessarily from a texture, that you can use and then paint on top of. And, I think a lot of people are like, well, why wouldn't you just use 3D? Well, I personally find it to be a little more fun to use 2D. Sometimes you just want to turn off your brain and not focus so much on technical things. And then a lot of times too, like if you're not familiar with 3D, like learning that can be like it's a huge learning curve. And it's not always, something you have time for. So I've been using 3D since like 2004. So I've used it for years and I understand it really well. And, I used to do a bunch of modeling and texturing and stuff, and I still do. Yeah, like I said, sometimes you just want to do something in 2D, and sometimes it's actually a little bit faster. Now you might not get like the finished quality of a 3D piece, and it's definitely not going to look as realistic all the time. But, does it matter? Is that what you need? Or are you just knocking out like a really quick concept for something? So it kind of depends on the actual like need of the project. If it's just for fun, like why not? It's a challenge to just try to do things in 2D sometimes as well. So I think for me, the hardest part really is coming in on that empty canvas and trying to figure out the 3D space in my mind, like where everything's going to be laid out. And then I think another thing that's super important that I haven't talked about yet, I think I've talked about in some of my other videos, but is finding that human scale. So anytime you're doing like an environment, you need to scale, you need to have items in there that represent human scale. So for example, in this case, I have a door and some windows, and those things right away let you know how big something is. Cars, stairs, doors, all of those things are really good at showing scale. So if you're in like a natural environment, it can be a little tricky, right? If it's just rocks and trees, to show like how big something actually is, because like until you put a person in there, it can be hard to tell. And that's why a lot of times with like more nature scenes, you see people put like a figure somewhere in it because you need that distinction. In this case, like when you're working with buildings, like it's built in, right? You have stairs, because the stairs are always a consistent height. Doors are usually 7 foot tall, or 8, I guess, if it's like a really big building, but like a commercial building. But they're usually around the same ish height, so you can kind of figure it out. And it's one of those things that like as you're drawing, you don't really think about it, but then somebody might look at it and not really understand the scale, because like when you're drawing it, you get it. But so that's something that's really important to keep in mind. And I know if you go into more fantasy stuff too, they can really get weird. Like I recently did this one sketch of a giant tower, and I made sure to make like there's like a bridge and some doors, and they're all really, really tiny. And that makes the tower feel even bigger. If I made the doors really big, then now all of a sudden it feels like a small tower. So it gets weird. It can also help where you place your camera angle, the height of your camera, especially if you're going to put it, you could always put it at like a human eye level, and that would help. This camera angle that I'm currently using is lower. It's more like a knee height, I guess. But yeah, just a couple things to think about. And if you're using 3D, then I always build stuff to scale. So like if doorways are always a specific height, ceilings are a specific height, like I said, stairs, and then you can even import like a base figure. But yeah, I think it'd be good to know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you prefer painting in 3D, or do you prefer 2D? And do you like both? Do you want to learn one or the other? I'd be curious to know, because yeah, like I said, I think it's just more relaxing personally to do it in 2D. And then there's something about like, I don't know, maybe feeling more ownership over it, which is silly, right? Because even though I'm not like blocking it out in 3D, it just doesn't always feel like mine. It's the same way when I use photo textures. And then there's nothing wrong with either one, because I use them both all the time. There's just, yeah, maybe for me, it's just a little bit more satisfying when I know that the whole thing just came out of my brain in 2D instead. I don't know. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. And yeah, thanks for watching this. I'll just let the rest of this video run out and play, and I'll see you in the next one.